There are many tales of elven lords, and their exploits are grand, valorous, and more than earned them their renown. Yet one of these high elves has earned his fame and more beyond. He was the first elf lord to assault the cursed city of Naggarond and live to tell the tale. He is the warden of Tor Yvresse, and he pursued the cause of scourging the green-skinned menace further than most. In this latest Total War Warhammer 2 DLC, Eltharion makes an appearance as a playable legendary lord, but he is not alone. Grom The Paunch, the largest and most powerful goblin warlord to have ever lived, also makes an appearance. The hulking goblin warlord is considered to be the only greenskin to have ever made a successful invasion against the distant lands of Ulthuan, and was responsible for one of the most destructive wars ever seen in the old world. In this lore overview video, we will explore the history that ties Eltharion the Grim and Grom the Paunch as they clash on the battlefield, each fighting for their own cause. Eltharion grew up under the guidance of Lore Master Bellinaire and other skilled tacticians and historians. He was taught and trained in the arts of war, politics, and leadership. Eltharion learned quickly and well. With time, he became one of the most respected and skilled individuals in Ulthuan.
No weakness. Our future depends upon me. I am sworn to avenge.
Eltharion the Grim is one of the greatest of the Elven Lords, often achieving feats that many, if not all, would deem impossible. During the reign of the Phoenix King known as Finubar the Seafarer, Eltharion became the first great elf lord to set sail to raid the foul city of Naggarond and return alive. The high elves that accompanied Eltharion on his quest were few, but highly skilled and disciplined. Upon arriving at the bleak and unforgiving lands of Naggaroth, also commonly known as the Land of Chill, they marched through the blasted landscape, swiftly taking many dark elf garrisons by surprise and razing them to the ground. Mounted on his majestic griffin, Stormwing, Eltharion himself rode down those dark elves that fled and ensured that none escaped to send word to Malekith, the Witch King. Through carefully coordinated attacks, patrols of Illyrian Reavers worked in concert with Shadow Warrior bands, ambushing enemy messengers and sowing terror and confusion deep into Dark Elf territory, until they were at the very gates of the Dark City of Naggarond itself. Upon their arrival, the boldest of this band of elite high elves disguised themselves in garb scavenged from the sacked garrisons and broke stealthily into the city, opening the gates from within. When the gates opened, Naggarond was at the mercy of Eltharion and his forces. The waiting high elves poured through the gates and made their strike. Many account of the horrible things they saw within the dark city, and were disgusted at the sight of how low and twisted their dark kin had fallen. Buildings were put to the torch, and countless denizens of Naggarond were put to the sword. After causing much havoc and taking key objectives, the High Elf invaders began to withdraw as resistance grew. But as they retreated as planned, tragedy finally struck. From the shadows, Eltharion was wounded by the unseen venomous blade of a witch elf. In his fury, Eltharion swung his weapon with such force that it killed the foul witch in a single blow, but the damage was already done. The envenomed blade had left its poison in his blood. The High Elves managed to successfully retreat with minimal losses, and the raid was considered to be a success. While on the march back to shore, the mighty Elf Lord began to succumb to the poison and his elves, unable to heal such a wound themselves, began to fear that Eltharion would not survive the journey back to Ulthuan. After an arduous crossing, the elves pitched camp near the shore of Ulthuan, at Trace, and many believed that Eltharion would surely die in his tent before dawn. The High Elf Lord, suffering from a strong fever and going through excruciating pain, started to have hallucinations as he faded in and out of consciousness. Aided by his most trusted lieutenants, Eltharion struggled for his life until his eyes closed.
There's only one king of the Gobbos, and that's me!
It must be said that while the Goblin race is a foul and misshapen breed, and its leaders are often the very worst of the worst, few begin their illustrious careers with a battle within their own guts. Grom began his rise to glory as an ordinary young goblin boss of the Broken Axe tribe, until the day he ate a raw portion of troll meat. Being a ravenous beast, Grom simply devoured the meat, caring little for the troll's natural ability to regenerate. In the epic event, now known as the Battle of the Belly, the battle between digestion and restoration waged fiercely within Grom. While many goblins would surely have exploded in such circumstances, he was beyond such frailty, and grew to enormous size in a short period of time. Grom the Paunch rose through the ranks to be the warlord of the Broken Axe tribe. Despite his massively fat body, the Goblin war boss was a deadly fighter that could take on anybody that challenged his authority. Many orcs and goblins within their tribe lost their lives for the same reason. Many years were well spent plundering the Wolflands, the Badlands, and the southern area of the World's Edge Mountains. He continued to grow in size, and eventually had to build a bulky chariot for himself. With so many victories beneath his now enormous and unnatural belly, Grom marched his Waaagh into a path of war and destruction. The Broken Axe tribe would soon learn of an assault on the Night Goblin tribe that lived on the Thunder Mountain. The Night Goblins put up resistance, but their attackers, led by the ferocious Jacques Gutstabber, orc warboss of the Gutstabber tribe, were too brutal for them. When news of the bloodshed on Thunder Mountain arrived, many of the weak and sniveling goblins under Grom's command argued that they should bend the knee before the orc horde that had broken the Night Goblins. But Grom would have none of it.
I've had enough chin-wagging with this git! He's been hiding out here, bragging about how big he is! All just rumours! He's nothing! Look at his stupid axe! He's trying to make himself look bigger!
The massive goblin warboss set out, alone, to challenge Zoc to a one-on-one duel. The orc warboss accepted the fight, and he let Grom into his own camp, assuring that he would not be ambushed or attacked. When the fight between the two warbosses began, things were sorted out quickly. The big orc managed to wound Grom first, but to the amazement of all greenskins surrounding the fight, the wound healed itself with incredible speed. When Grom attacked with his weapon, Zoc was not so lucky, and died almost instantly. Grom's takeover bid for the Gutstabber tribe into his own was only resolved after he slew every orc big boss in the tribe, and there was no one left to challenge his authority. Hundreds of orc and goblin tribes traveled from all over the Badlands and beyond to see De Grayton, and join his massive wall in the hopes that it will bring them a proper scrap. And they were not disappointed. In the year 2410 of the Imperial calendar, Grom led his ever-growing Wa through Blackfire Pass and northwards along the dwarf-held territories. The massive greenskin horde brought several holds to ruin and desecrated the tombs of many of their ancestors as the dwarves gathered to hew down the offending goblin war boss and his followers. They finally collided at the Battle of Iron Gate. The dwarves, led by King Bragaric, met Grom's massive army, compounded by hundreds of different tribes from all over the old world. After 3 days of non-stop fighting, both races parted ways to recount for casualties and catch a breather. There was no clear victor, only a heavy tally of death and destruction. While the dwarfs laid low many a foul greenskin, they took heavy casualties themselves, with many a noble dwarf warrior laid to rest by foul and dirty hands. This was only compounded by the fact that more orcs and goblins were arriving every day, eager to serve under De Greatum and bolster his now titanic wall. So it was, with heavy hearts and wounded pride, that the dwarves were forced to retreat into their fortresses and holds. Without losing time in realizing the full scale of the threat they now faced, they sent a call for aid to the Empire of Man. Alas, the Emperor at the time was Dieter IV, possibly the most feckless man to ever sit upon the imperial throne. Upon hearing the dire news from the dwarf messenger, Dieter saw fit to remove himself and his entire court from the then capital Nuln to Altdorf in an attempt to get even further away from the threat. To the dwarves, this was considered an insult, and soon another name was added to the Book of Grudges. This did not bode well for neither the dwarves nor the men of the Empire, who now had no option but to weather the storm of the largest Wa to have ever been assembled since the days of Sigmar Heldenhammer, as it moved westwards, leaving a trail of destruction, havoc, and smelly fetidness in its wake. One by one, many settlements and cities fell to the uncontainable numbers that made the Goblin Horde. In a short period of time, the mightiest of human nations was little more than a collection of isolated communities, huddling desperately behind heavily defended walls, while Grom's hordes roamed and plundered far and wide across the lands of the Empire. After reaching the coast of Nordland, Grom ordered his horde to build a fleet unlike anything seen before. Enormous hulks of crudely fashioned wood, timber, and anything the goblins could find was used as raw materials to assemble the rudimental ships. Grom, without waiting for the rest of his gargantuan horde to catch up, and motivated by his powerful shaman, Old Blacktooth, set sail.
Take to the sea.
Blacktooth had said.
Gork and Mork were new lands to crush.
Marienburg was their next target, as it lay open to invasion. But, as fortune would have it, the weather took a turn for the worse. Strong gales whipped up a rough sea, and at last the poor seamanship of the Orcs and Goblins caught up with them. Unable to reach safety, many vessels, each crammed with greenskins, sank unceremoniously, killing hundreds with each vessel sunk. The rest of the fleet was blown out to sea, and over the horizon, Grom's Wa would soon terrorize other lands. Back in Ulthuan, and impaired by the poisonous venom in his blood, Eltharion was at the brink of death. While in his tent, in the grip of a fierce and fiery fever dream, Eltharion was visited by the spirit of none other than his father, Moranion. The pallid spectre, marred by many battle wounds, told his son of his own fate, and the fate that would befall all of Ulthuan if Eltharion did not act soon. A vast green-skinned horde, led by Grom, a colossal fat goblin, and a shaman of unmeasurable power, mounted atop a huge wyvern, was now on the shores of Ulthuan, and had sacked their home of Athel Tamara and many other places. Fields of magical crops, unique to Yvresse, were trampled beneath iron-shod feet, never to be seen again, and any settlement that came in the goblins' path was razed to the ground. In their ignorance, typical of their foul race, the goblin scum had defiled every waystone in their path, causing the powerful energies contained within the vortex to become destabilized and scourging the land as a result of the untamed winds of magic, now spiraling without control. If left unchecked, this foul goblin war would bring the same fate down on all remaining waystones in their path. Worse still, the fall of a single more of these powerful towers would surely mean there would be no more artifacts of power to channel the winds of magic within the vortex, causing a cataclysm of a magnitude not seen since the Sundering. Following their path of destruction, their next target was most likely to be the waystone of Tor Yvresse, since the armies of the Phoenix King were too far to intervene, the spirit said. It was Eltharion's duty to stop the war and save Ulthuan and the world from ruin. Upon waking, Eltharion was free from the hold of the vile witch elf's poison and found the Fang Sword, his family's heirloom blade, in the very place where his father's ghostly presence had stood. Upon taking up the blade, the Elf Lord felt a renewal of his strength and vigor. He had renewed purpose, and he acted immediately. When the High Elf lieutenants found Eltharion in the morning, alive, they were shocked, almost beyond sense. He told his commanders to muster their ships as swiftly as possible, for they must reach Tor Yvresse with all haste and secure its waystone.
It is now clear that the weakening of the talisman was not without reason. The medallion's connection to the ancient waystones has revealed a dire fate. This ruinous host seeks to destroy this waystone, and all others that protect Ulthuan. Our proximity to it shall grant us its power, but it also nourishes our foes. If we fail, Yvresse will fall, and all Ulthuan will be next. The fate of the Vortex, nay, the entire world, rests on our shoulders.
Grom was truly a mighty goblin. In his own words, the mightiest goblin that had ever lived. But nothing would inflate his ego more than the fact that he was the first war boss to reach the mist-coated shores of far Ulthuan. His fleet of ramshackle ships, beyond the understanding of any, had managed to traverse the waters to the home of the High Elves. Although Grom's passing was not without cost, many ships were sundered, sinking to the bottom of the sea. However, despite these losses, when Grom finally made landfall, it was still of titanic size. Upon their arrival, mighty Grom ordered the fleet ships destroyed, and the materials to be fashioned into terrible siege engines. From the bleak shores of Yvresse, Grom and his despicable horde began to lay waste to all in their path. Once proud and noble cities fell, their ashes blowing away on the wind like leaves. But worst of all their sacrilege was their defilement of the precious waystones. With each waystone that fell, the energies of the vortex grew uncontrollably, empowering the goblin shaman Blacktooth more and more as the winds of magic were more readily available for him. Now crazed beyond sanity, and thirsting for more of this power, the shaman was set to destroy every waystone in Ulthuan. Every force that was sent to deal with the goblin horde failed to do so. The number of greenskins coming in this invasion was unprecedented, and one by one, settlements and watchtowers fell to the anarchy that the goblins brought with them. Grom led his Wa across the island, and finally came to the gates of Tor Yvresse itself, his vast horde jabbering with excitement at the prospect of destroying another pointy-eared city. Although Grom could not replace any lost troops after each battle, he still had more goblins than he would ever need to take the city. And so he set his disgusting siege engines to work, battering Tor Yvresse for an entire day. Colossal boulders pulverized the once beautiful towers of the city to little more than powder. Into this madness, Grom ordered the final advance, quickly overcoming the weakened defenses of Tor Yvresse and pouring in. The green-skinned horde reveled in the anarchy they sowed in the once proud city, stopping in their killing only to tear the arms from gorgeous statues, taunt wounded elves, and to generally wallow in their achievement. However, while they were busy enjoying the assault, Eltharion with his forces entered the fray. Upon their arrival, the High Elves found the proud city in flames, its once glorious streets befouled by goblins and orcs that raged within the city walls. The great shaman Blacktooth, Grom's right hand, circled the skies above the city on the back of a mighty wyvern and hurled down bolts of dark magic. Taking in the dire situation that was unfolding before them, Eltharion bade his most loyal soldiers to secure the Warden's tower and the waystone within, for that was their only chance at victory. With vengeance in his eyes, Eltharion took to the skies on the back of his griffin Stormwing. His men, seeing the boldness of their lord, emulated his bravery and stormed Tor Yvresse, cutting down every orc, goblin, or foul creature on their path. Eltharion, meanwhile, sought to destroy the great shaman that rained destruction down on the noble city below. In a strike that almost caught the shaman off guard, Eltharion drove Stormwind straight into the fight. However, the High Elf Lord would soon be forced onto the back foot, as the empowered shaman propelled spell after spell, constantly battering him. The shaman prepared the killing blow, a dark spell that would surely strike Eltharion dead, when he was left dumbfounded mid-incantation. Eltharion's soldiers had finally secured the Warden's tower below, and performed an incantation of ending, a spell which momentarily stabilized the winds of magic. Using this lull in power to his advantage, Eltharion once more charged the goblin shaman, and in a vicious strike, took his head off. At the sight of this shortcoming, both Grom and his Wa fell prey to the more ingrained parts of their nature, and turned tail and ran, while the elves swiftly delivered their long-due vengeance with the edge of their blades. Eltharion did not stop to savor the victory, as his duty was not over. He went, with 4 of his bravest warriors, into the Warden's tower. There they wrestled with the unleashed powers of the Waystone, seeking to stabilize the vortex once again. Of what occurred within, nothing is known, and of the 5 that entered, only Eltharion alone came out alive, his face grimmer than ever. Not even the sunrise nor the cheering crowds of the victorious High Elves could force a smile from him. He was elected Warden of Tor Yvresse in recognition of his feats, but from then on, he was forever known as Eltharion the Grim. As for the final fate of Grom the Paunch, no one can say with certainty what became of the fat goblin. He was never found in Ulthuan in all the years since. Yet there are still those who believe Grom moves abroad in the homeland of the Elves, and simply bides his time until he can rebuild his colossal wall, and once more bring battle to the races of Ulthuan and the Old World.
Where is he? It has been many years, but this city will never be safe. Not whilst he is still out there.
For his great courage shown in the defense of the city against the greenskin enemy, Eltharion was named Warden of Tor Yvresse. The city had endured, but entire sections of the once majestic place were in ruins, and the waystones suffered severe damage. Some of them were beyond repair. The instability of the vortex endangered the safety of Ulthuan, and by consequence, the world as a whole. Eltharion's early rule was mainly characterized by the campaign he led to scour the greenskins remaining from the land, and the repairs he made to the network of damaged waystones. The home of the Elves had endured the onset of the assault, but Eltharion recognized it had only been one single wall, and the damage it caused was devastating. He swore that no other greenskin invasion would reach Ulthuan's shores. Mounted atop his mighty griffin, Eltharion took his blade overseas, heading directly to the Badlands. The greenskins would soon learn to fear the High Elves.
Ancestors, stand with us this day!
And no orc nor goblin would dare set foot in the fair lands of Ulthuan ever again. Sweeping like a wind of blades, Eltharion the Grim killed warboss after warboss, eliminated tribe after tribe, yet more and more green-skinned scum kept coming. Rusty orc fortresses were toppled to the ground, and with fire he extinguished the remains of the many green-skinned hordes that clashed against his mighty force. Miraculously, Wa after Wa kept coming and crashing against Eltharion the Grim. It seemed that it was a war without end. Finally, Eltharion learned the dire truth. His reputation had spread so far and wide across the Badlands that warbosses were actually seeking his army, knowing that the pointy end would give him a proper fight. This revelation ended Eltharion's battles in those savage lands. Returning to Yvresse, Eltharion began to train his armies and fortify the cities as never before. If any greenskin dared to attack Ulthuan ever again, they would be prepared. On this channel, we are putting together narrative Total War cinematic battles and Warhammer lore videos. A special thank you goes to our Patreon supporters who help us in the making of more content. You can also join Patreon and earn extra perks while supporting the videos to come. Find the link in the description below. Make sure to subscribe, and thank you for watching. See you on the next one.